This is Kevin Pruitt with another episode of Rising Tide Startups. And my guest today is Steve Hughes. Steve, thanks for joining us on Rising Tide.
Happy to be here.
So, Steve, can you share a little bit about yourself to our Rising Tide audience?
Yes, the most important things are I'm very good at parallel parking.
That's
I
important.
enjoy. It's a gift. I've been on trips before where people have gotten out of the car, had me hop in, and then actually do the parking. So I know cars do it themselves now, which I feel like AI is killing one of my
It's right.
coolest
You're now
attributes. But
obsolete. That's right.
what are you going to do? But that's important. I had to get that out. I didn't want to have that be kind of elephant in the room. Like people are wondering, how good is he at parallel parking? I just want to get that out right off the
Mark that
bat.
question off my
So,
list.
no, obviously, I like to have fun. I live in St. Louis, Missouri. Family, married 25 years, a couple of daughters, both very happily. Wink, wink. Home from college, doing homeschool because of the virus thing. But actually, we're all adjusting well, having a lot of cool times with that we wouldn't have had otherwise with our family all in the nest together. Most importantly, we have a dog, a wonderful golden retriever, which is probably the best thing I have going on right now in terms of my personal staying at home experience. And then had a kind of an eclectic career, including advertising, a little stand-up comedy, speaking, training, a whole lot of stuff that I can certainly get into that happy to shed more light on.
Well, I appreciate you kind of laying the groundwork for us. And, when you mentioned golden retriever, we have our family pet is also a golden retriever. He happens to be a miniature version. And
What? I know that
so,
even existed.
well, if you take a King Charles Spaniel and a golden retriever and marry them together, you get it's called like a comfort retriever or a miniature golden. So,
Now, how big are
um,
we talking?
Cocker Spaniel, lanky Cocker Spaniel size.
But But it looks like it. But it looks like
Looks
a
like a
golden
gold.
retriever.
Looks like a red golden, but I made I accidentally, as I was trimming him the other day a little bit to kind of get his summer coat on, I hacked a chunk out of the fur on the back. So now he looks like a poodle. So the poor guy is probably going to
Oh my
self
gosh.
quarantine just out of shame. So yeah,
Oh,
he
that's cool.
will
I had
never
no
let me
idea.
get near. So with
Oh,
clippers
that's
again, I'm
awesome.
sure. So.
That's so cool.
Yeah, he's a great dog. But you know what? I would rather talk about you and your experience because this is your show. But I'm
Wouldn't
just
everybody?
curious. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. I mean, I've kind of looked at your bio and I've got a lot of questions, but I
Yeah.
really just walk us through the whole idea of just how you kind of stepped into what you do.
I'd be happy to. And the coolest thing is it's almost like looking back over time to what I'm doing now. It's amazing how each little piece came together. And at the time, I couldn't always see what I was doing or what was adding up to. And that's why I would ever encourage entrepreneurs or folks like that to not get too frustrated about any one moment. I'll give you my
It's good.
uh, 92-second background is basically I was a French lit European history major in college. Woohoo! Used it all the time. Mainly when I go through hotel lobbies, I can say, "Look, everybody, it's a concierge," and I can pronounce it right.
With a real posh
And
accent.
that's yeah. So and then very briefly between college and I did go to grad school, I taught high school history for a year, inspired by a Dead Poet Society. Realized I didn't want to be a teacher, though. I love the teaching part, but the all rest of it was not my thing. Sold computers for an IBM reseller. I did all sorts of stuff like that. Got an MBA in marketing in a few years after that. And then the interesting period, I always say to folks, I had that 12 years of, if I can use an example from the Old Testament, if you will, good old Joseph was stuck in an Egyptian prison for 13 years. I call my 12 years in advertising just about as bad. I just didn't like it. I kept thinking, like a lot of people, oh, it'll keep getting better. It'll keep, okay, maybe I'll get that job. When I get that promotion, when I get that account, each thing will get better, and it never did. And then the thing, there's two things that changed my life that made me who I am now in terms of an entrepreneur. One was a dare from a buddy of mine over Easter ham, of all things, where my brother-in-law basically, he said, "Steve, you're a funny guy. I used to think you're a nice guy, but you're nothing in my book until you do stand-up comedy. Just do 5 minutes of stand-up comedy, and then I'll appreciate you." And I was like, okay. I didn't know you don't always have to do every dare you get. And I don't like to brag, but I did go out to the comedy forum out in St. Louis, and for those 5 minutes on stage, I don't like to brag, but I was terrible. It was awful. I mean, it was like most people. In fact, Jay Leno will tell you he bombed for a year, like literally got up for a year. What about this? No laugh, no laugh. And he finally got there. But here's the thing. I kind of stuck with it. Thought it was kind of fun. I was still working my day job. Didn't really enjoy it, but I kept working it. But I started reading books, getting in touch with people. How does comedy work? And then I got in touch with a guy who wrote several books on it. And he found out what I did, and we developed a relationship. He said, "Hey, could we take some of your advertising and PR background, which again I didn't like, and help me put on a comedy seminar? Because unless you're in like New York, LA, Chicago, something like that, it's hard to break into comedy. Like it's hard to, people don't go to, no offense, people don't go to Topeka to make it big in comedy,
Yeah.
but then what he did find out though, well, he told me that if you can work clean, like clean comedy, not doing the sex jokes and dropping F-bombs, there's money to be made. And this was even, gosh, 15, almost 20 years ago. If you could do a half hour of clean comedy at say a regional sales event for somebody, without $2,500 without dropping without thinking twice. And yet that same comedian working rough, working blue, would do 4 shows in front of drunk people over the weekend at the Chuckle Hut in Tulsa, Oklahoma, living in a rat infested apartment. It's like, the math is interesting. So I thought, okay, this is fine. Here's one thing we learned, by the way, entrepreneurially, just for fun. We found out that comedians have no money. So that was not a good target market to be a part of. We profited $9. Thank you very much. Woohoo. I made $9.
With the day job.
But here's the cool part. The neatest thing, so the second thing that changed my life, not just the dare, the second thing was a buddy of mine, big, smart, fancy high school friend, went to Harvard Law School. Apparently he must be smart. And he said, "Hey, Steve, I heard about your comedy seminar. Could you come up to our law firm over lunch one day and make all of our lawyers funny?" And I was like, okay, I can make them taller, and I'll cure cancer, and I'll do cold fusion. What else do you want me to do? Perpetual
I'll
motion.
understand
What
my
else do you
mind's
want?
wife or my wife's
Exactly
mind.
right. Exactly right. Yeah, I'll figure out the mind of the teenage brain. I mean, I'll figure it all out, all the mysteries of the world. But the cool thing is, I said, well, what do you really want? What do you need? Like he said, well, here's the thing. We're super smart. We're good at what we do. We're at this high-powered law firm, but we're not that good at connecting with humans. Like we're not that good at taking our wonderful knowledge up here and our insight on the law and helping people, feel good about how we're
Yeah.
doing it and making relationships and business development. I said, okay, I'll see what I can do. So they paid me nicely, flew me up, put me in a hotel. And I did it. They handed me a check. I can't believe someone paid me to flap my jaws for an hour and a half. I thought, is it a real check? Like the old days, you'd buy a coin. Like,
Right, you'd buy it. Exactly.
And I came home and I said to my wife, I said, honey, I said, if you'll take a gamble with me, and this is huge. I know it's very important to have a supportive spouse, partner kind of thing.
Yeah.
I said, hey, if I did enough of these, we could easily pay the bills. We could make this happen. I didn't know how hard it was to get started, but still, I just didn't know. I didn't know that existed. I didn't know. So then I literally quit my job. I quit my job just a couple months later with one client, and became the speaker, trainer, entrepreneur, consultant guy. And that
Now,
was
this was one
2005.
client with one gig, or one client with kind of a recurring gig?
One client, one gig. But I thought it'd be so easy. And then actually, and it's very cool. And here's the thing I say to people all the time that I'm sure you've heard a million times on your podcast and elsewhere. The number one business accelerator, dare I say, learning curve shortener, almost like, they call it folding time or folding space. Like, the quickest way to go from here to here is to fold the paper, was the relationships I had. And that's where I was talking about all the things that were the little crumbs and pebbles that were out there. So it was actually this one friend that invited me to speak the first time, then 2 other high school buddies and a couple other folks I just knew, just, hey, who do you know that ... Took them out to lunch, took them to coffee, and it was easy. I wasn't hitting them up for business. That's tough. Like, hey, would you like to buy aluminum siding? I just said, hey, who can you pass me along to? And they're happy to do it. And it's those things that I think really made the difference between me making it. Because my wife and I said, hey, if it doesn't really hit after a couple of years, we got to feed our kids and whatnot. I would have gone back and gotten a job, not in advertising,
Sure.
but I would have gotten a job somewhere, So,
Well, I
so
wanted
all
to
those
ask
things
you,
I said before. So good.
Go, no, go ahead, finish your thought, and I'll
I'd say
ask you a
just so
follow-up
all those
question.
things, like the people I met in teaching, the people I met selling computers, the people I met in business school, the people I met even in advertising, clients I had, people, whatever. All those folks became my channel to make it happen. So literally, if I've been one of those folks, I know entrepreneurialism is a new thing now, and if you haven't made it big by 30, you're an old man. I'm an old man. But had I not had those 12 to 15 years of just regular business and business relationships, and also, I mean, I got to credit God on this one, that I wasn't a chump to those people. I mean, I was a
Yeah,
nice guy,
yeah.
but there's no bridge burning. So when it came time to pick up the phone or send out that text, they're usually pretty easy reach outs, if you will.
I wanted to just circle back with you real quick. You kind of breezed over the idea of when you stepped into it, and you started doing, your foray into comedy, and you felt like you had kind of almost bombed, that
Oh,
first attempt. But so something caused you to come back and try that again. Was it? I mean, the two big things I think would either be just the challenge of I am just bound and determined to do this, or maybe it was somehow inherently in your blood a little bit, and you had just kind of, unleashed the kraken there. So was it either of those? Was it some combination of that, or was it just blind faith? I mean, what caused you to, if most people, when they hit that first obstacle, they would quit, go back to what, safe island, and just land. But what caused you to
yeah.
keep pushing?
Well, have to tell you something. So my wife and I had a bet, like how many minutes into the podcast interview would the word Kraken come up, and I won because the over was 12 minutes, and I got it. So anyway, I'm just kidding. I love the Kraken. That's a great analogy.
It is.
Actually, I'd say it's a combo. One is so little more info. So in high school, a lot of people get most likely to succeed, or nicest guy or best smile. I got class clown. So thank you very much. But I've
You
always
were
been kind of
destined. Yeah,
yeah, my main thing has always been kind of being funny, and I was the kind of the guy at the party to make people laugh and that sort of thing. So in some ways, when I wasn't funny, it really ticked me off. I was like, "You got to be kidding me! Like, I know I'm funny, but what I didn't realize, and a lot of people who try stand-up comedy will recognize, what makes someone good and quick and funny is just I'm reacting to something you brought up.
for
I'm
sure.
not sitting there. Suddenly now it's you and a microphone. You have to do the setup and what's the deal with politics? You have to do
Hmm.
your own kind of setting it up, and it bummed me out that I couldn't have been. I can almost guarantee if I went to a party, I could probably be funny at least at some point. What made me mad was I couldn't just show up on command and make strangers laugh. I mean, I was like, plus the other thing is they're primed. You better make me laugh. Like they're kind of almost like sitting there like this, like
Yeah, it's a challenge.
you know. So I didn't want to give up that quickly, and I also thought like, okay, um, maybe if I try a little bit more, I can make it happen. So yeah, I stuck with it. Um, and that's why I'm always amazed when you read about people like a Chris Rock or even like Dave Chappelle, these folks who start out like really young, almost like in high school, even in college age, that they're out there. And a lot of comedians do it really young. And I just wouldn't have had the wherewithal. I mean, part of it was I was in my 30s by that point, and I thought, okay, I'm tired about caring about stuff. I was on my way to being Mr. Bald. Like, I was a dad. Like, what, oh, I'm not cool anymore. Like, was I ever? I mean, I don't know. So,
I've got teenagers at home. I mean, what more could you throw at me? I mean, you know,
exactly. Right. Yeah.
that's
Yeah. What
right.
else you got? So,
Yeah,
it was a
that's the worst
combination
you
of
can bring.
challenge.
That's exactly right. I love the way you kind of frame this whole idea, and this has happened so often. I mean, we've had 150 plus interviews here on Rising Tide, and just the idea that nothing is ever wasted, kind of in the economy
Yeah.
of your life. I mean, so many things. It's like this beautiful mosaic that's just being built over time until you finally discover, this is what I was created for. This is what
Right.
this is who I am. And when you find that, and obviously you have found that, I mean, it really does. And I don't want to be too trite about this, but it almost seems like it's no longer work. It's
Yeah.
almost like I'm just kind of I'm just walking in my own shoes for the first time in my life, so to speak. So walk us through the kind of the whole, I guess, trajectory up to today. Once you started, you launched out on your own. You were trying to book some speaking gigs and that type of thing. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously it was just a big right-handed hockey stick curve, and you've never looked back, and you've always booked clients. You've never been worried about it, and you
Yeah.
turn people away now in droves. I mean, what walk us through that?
Exactly. Yeah. It's funny. Yeah. It's, I no longer have bad breath. It's amazing. Yeah. And
My
I've never
hair's
had a
growing
problem.
back. That's
Exactly.
right.
No, so here's the thing I realized, and this is something that I talk to people all the time is there's that, and I struggle with this mentality all the time. Kind of I have struggled with for years and still do, kind of an all or nothing mentality. Like even to
Mhm.
say from eating perspective, I'll vacillate between I'm eating nothing but wheatgrass and tree bark, or I'm eating Oreos by the sleeve. It's like
No
it's
middle
whereas
ground.
life is really lived in the tension between the middle. It's not one or the other, this extreme. So I'm very fortunate, and I wasn't too high or too low on myself when I first started out. So kind of, again, I was knocking on every door. People don't want to usually hire untested, unproven, unvalidated speakers. But again, the people I knew would, and that was cool. But I also connected with a couple of training outfits, one in New York, and not outfit like, put it on, but like
Yeah,
organization,
sure.
clear. So a training organization out of New York and one out of St. Louis, where they actually provided clients at a much reduced fee.
Hmm.
But all I do is they'd call me up or send me an email. Hey, can you be in, Buffalo, New York next week? Sure. And then for one of them, I trained on their material, and the other one I trained on my material. So between those two companies, as well as the ones I was bringing in myself, I didn't really care, and there was no pride involved. I didn't care if I had to again work with and use other people to help me get my gigs. Because the other cool thing is I would go speak, let's say at AT&T is one of them.
Yeah,
I would go and speak on their behalf at AT&T, but I spoke at AT&T. I can now mention, hey, when I was at AT&T, like that kind of stuff was
right.
huge.
It's a door
Oh, you've been
opener.
at
Yeah.
AT&T. They
Mm.
didn't say, well, who was it through?
Yeah.
I mean, no one cares. Just and it was all legit good stuff. Um, so to me, yes, that was not there was no hockey stick of goodness. It was a very slow kind of build, but then it's funny, things really heated up. I had a fantastic year in 2008. And if you can remember back
What
at the end
happened
of
right after
2008,
that? Yeah.
what
Yeah.
happened? But here's the cool thing. Again, I'm a very spiritual guy. It'll come out that I really believe in God's provision and His direction in my life. And I was actually very fortunate through one of those companies I work with. I got this contract with the Department of Defense. And one thing that the Department of Defense did throughout the recession was they kept spending money. So I got to go. In fact, I've got to go out to Pearl Harbor and train at Joint Base Pearl, which is kind of
Mm,
cool. So
wow.
I had to go all over the country and train these many civilians, but also enlisted folks in communication, presentation skills. That was kind of my main thing. And so even during those lean years, we had to tighten up a bit. I was able to kind of come through. And I'd say probably since maybe 2011, 2012, I've severed relationships. So it's been me 100% since 2012. And again, the hardest thing for me, like you said, the up and down is for me, is to not freak out any given month or two about, oh my gosh, income looks really low. Is to look at least by quarter or certainly by the year. Okay,
Right.
maybe usually my summer is pretty strong. July is usually a good month, but maybe this year July is not that strong. Well, don't freak out about July, because how's my August? How's my September?
Sure, sure.
That sort of
Yeah.
thing.
And I think the
So
number of years will help you kind of, I mean, as you look back, I mean, 1 year history is different than looking back at a 10-year history, and
exactly
to see
right.
the trend,
Exactly
how
right.
these have worked out, so to speak. But
Right.
so you and I are hopping on an elevator. We're going to go up 10 floors. You got about 45 seconds. Give me your very best elevator pitch. I'm a business owner. What can you bring to the table for me?
Well, I'll tell you, just for fun, as a little caveat, um, I'm a big believer in elevator conversations versus elevator pitches. So my elevator pitch is about 8 seconds, if you know that, and then it's supposed to lead to more things. So if we're in an elevator, we're heading up a couple
We can chat
flights.
about the Cardinals for the rest of the time if you want to. I mean, it's up to
Exactly
you.
right, exactly. It's boring. Hey, how about them Cardinals? So, but people say, hey, what do you do for a living, or what do you do, or what are you up to, or why are you here? I basically say this. I say, I help people look and sound smart when they talk, and then I shut up, and
Then
then
you get out on the second floor.
exactly, and we're done. Thank you. That's my time. So, but then I've kind of stumbled on that line in 2009 when I was actually around a bunch of other presenters and speakers like myself, and it was hard to say something really sexy. But I discovered that by basically I was going to a huge, um, a huge. Well, I was at a conference going to a huge, plenary session, and all these people were speakers, they were trainers, they were doing leadership, they're doing presentation skills, all sorts of stuff. I had nothing unique to tell them. So I'm riding down the escalator, and I realized every time when someone would say, "What do you do for a living?" Well, I deliver presentation skills and lead development training for these kind. No one cares. I just said, I help people look and sound smart when they talk, and I happen to shut up. And since that moment in July of '09, every single time people will respond with, "Well, what do you mean? Who do you do that for? How do you do that?" Then I go in and I'll say things. So my quick answer is I spin around back to them. Well, where do you work again? And then they'll say, "Oh, I work in real estate." And then I'll say, "Do you ever give presentations?" So I make this whole conversation about them. But my outbound marketing, because I can't market everybody, has mainly been legal. It just happens to be from that very first law
Yeah.
firm, just firm after firm. And it's a weird thing. Once I got labeled by a few, or not labeled, but once I got in with a few huge firms, then everybody loved me. Like once you're big in with Latham and Watkins, oh my gosh, you must be awesome. Yes, I'm awesome, but I'll take whatever you got. Um, but then and then they'll say, how do you do that? Do you do one-on-one? Yes. Or do you do small group, large group? And as I unfold all that, like if we didn't have a chance to do this whole conversation, that I basically help people communicate more effectively. They don't care how I do it. They just want to know at the end of it, will I make more sales? Will I connect more with people? Will I be more influential? Will I feel more confident? What do I do when something goes wrong during a presentation? So all that stuff is kind of what I talk about. And so outbound, again, I focus mainly on the legal market and legal associations. But inbound, I'm very strict on who I'll work with. They have to have a budget. Well, I guess that's it. If they have a budget, I'll pretty much work with
They
them.
got to have a face and
So
a heartbeat, and other than that,
exactly, yeah,
real high standards,
yeah,
right? So I read somewhere where you've done over 800 plus, I guess, presentations
yeah,
or chats to
yeah.
groups. So can you just kind of recall out of the recesses of your mind? I'm really curious. Maybe the very best moment that you can ever remember being on stage, and maybe just touch on really briefly like the very worst moment. Let's start with the
Oh,
worst one and let's end on something good. So what's the
yeah.
worst
Let's go.
experience
Okay,
you ever had?
okay. Worst moment. And this is
You
off.
don't have
This
to
is early
name
on.
names or anything. Yeah.
Just I don't mind naming it. Well, it was a large financial house. Uh, that I guess at the time they were based in St. Louis. It's not Edward Jones, but this is
Not
through a
named
friend of a
Edward Jones.
friend
Yeah.
from business school. A friend of a friend in business school, and this is an unpaid gig, but I got a chance to go in and talk about how to add humor. I basically did the same program I did for the law firm, the lawyers, just months earlier. I now did for people who were professional trainers within this big financial, like these people would train incoming financial advisors and stuff. So I stupidly, even though I wasn't advertising for 12 years, I didn't think about my audience, did the exact same program, and they found it way too pedestrian. They found it way like, yeah, we already knew how to add humor. Like you didn't tell us anything we hadn't heard of in training 101. And I even got feedback from the guy, the friend of a friend, who was like, yeah, thanks for coming in and making me look like an idiot. So it just, but everybody has to have a bad one. It just
Yeah.
was I also, by the way, I focused way too much on me and my personal story. And I realized, hey, if you're Tiger Woods, or you're someone pretty cool, and you're Brad Pitt, or Pickett, doesn't matter. You're someone pretty famous. You can talk about yourself forever. If you're an unknown, but a regular nice guy, I just find people don't really care about you. In fact, I'm thinking about writing a book called No One Cares About You. And I mean that in the best possible way, like they're more worried about themselves kind
And
of
how to
thing.
leverage that in
That's probably one of
business.
the worst.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly right. In fact, a different financial house, real quickly, Edward Jones. This actually was I heard about at a friend's wedding in Charleston, South Carolina, of all things. They did a quick study, well, not quick study, a big study of all their offices. And they, at the time, had like 6,000 or 7,000 local offices, and they found the best Edward Jones agents, the most successful, were not the ones who worked the hardest, not the ones who had the best scores on their examinations. The number one thing with the best ever financial planners, where for every minute they're on the phone or face to face with a client, they only speak about 14 seconds out of every minute. Now, it's almost like a no duh, the whole classic 2 ears and 1 mouth, use them accordingly.
Yeah.
But it's just amazing. So when people just would listen and be heard first, then when they unleash their insight for those 14 seconds, it would be great. So anyway, so I did the opposite. I thought, let me just tell about myself and how good I am and all this and people just didn't care. So that was the worst. The best, it's funny. I'm torn between the best. One real quickly, I spoke at a women's conference. Thank you very much. Which by the way,
There's
there are all
eye
sorts of people
candy.
saying, why is a man leading a women's conference? I was like, I don't know. I didn't, I guess I didn't pick myself, but the person called me and gave me money. That's the first place I got a standing ovation, which was pretty awesome. It was
Wow.
up in Newport, Rhode Island. But that's aside. The best one, oddly enough, was any speaker or trainer will tell you that she or he will tell you that anytime you do a new topic or a big thrust of a keynote, or you have just I'm really knowledgeable, I've never done this particular talk before, like anything doesn't go that well. I mean, it goes okay, it's all right, but it's like learning to ride a bike. You fall over 50 times and then you figure it out. So this was, gosh, only just a couple of years ago when I should have mentioned, for the past 5 years, 4 years, I've been doing improv comedy. So I started with stand up and now I do improv. So I've been doing improv on the side. That's been a lot of fun as a part of a troupe that I did at my first ever improv based program, which because I was with a client who said, we've done everything you have. What else you got? And I really had nothing. So I said, oh, I got a great new program. You'll love it. I'll see you there in a couple of months. It's called
After I write.
the Power of Yes. I mean, I was making it up. I was like Bill Gates, like, yeah, I got DOS figured out, and then they basically sold it in and they had to go figure it out, right, between the time they promised it. So I got up and did this program called the Power of Yes, which is basically how to use the key principles of improv to live a more fulfilling life, but also have better teamwork and all that kind of good stuff that improv allows you to do. Not silly yuck it up, but truly mental discipline of how to look at situations and always look for the positive, add, build, etc. So again, I was super nervous, scared me to death. Even though these folks knew me, they'd known me from my programs I'd done a million times.
Yeah.
This is someone I'd never done before. And so I got to tell you, while it didn't garner a standing ovation, it was probably one of the best. Just I felt like Steve Hughes in his element, doing the right thing. All the stuff I ever brought together, all the things from high school, all the things that
Yeah.
made me, the class clown, all came together in this beautiful business-focused moment. And I thought, oh my goodness, I cannot believe that went so well the first time. That I finally feel like I discovered my thing. My back what City Slickers. What's your one thing?
Yeah, that's
You know
right.
which is a great reference from the early 90s for the younger people. Sorry about that.
Google it, millennial.
So, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, boomer. Okay, Xer. I guess I'm an Xer. So, what can you do? So that was my really highlight. And that just meant mainly, the cool thing about it was it meant that I stumbled onto something that was really, I needed a new chapter in what I was delivering, and to have it go that well. And each speech has gotten better from that. So, it's been sweet.
Well, I mean, I really appreciate you kind of walking us through their timeline over the last number of years. And just, I really wanted to just once again reinforce your whole idea of this idea of looking back and looking at trends versus, I mean, it's like looking back as a movie, not as a snapshot, of a
Right.
specific time. And nothing could be more important, to do that right now than in the midst of this, COVID-19 coronavirus that business owners are facing. And I
Yeah.
would love for you just to take a minute here and just, as we're wrapping up, I want to honor your time, but as we're wrapping up, just speak to just business owners and give them two or three, especially early stage business owners, give them two or three points that you use to kind of, you know, keep the keel straight in the water type thing, even in the
Yeah.
midst of a storm. And what are two or three just foundational steps that somebody could really
Sure.
hang on to as, hopeful hints type thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say, and these are straight out of so you teed that up beautifully, bing, right over the plate. Um, for these principles in the program that I have that's since become I name it, it's called Unflappable. And that's the name of my program. So look what the word unflappable means. It means not easily perturbed
Mhm.
or upset or derailed. Means unusually calm, which is interesting. And the word's only been around since the 50s. I was so surprised that that word not been around. I mean, Shakespeare didn't say it's unflappable, just whatever. But one of the key things is you turn mistakes into gifts. And I mean, gift with a T, not a GIF like a computer image.
Right.
Um, So you look at some of the best inventions ever. Literally, inventions or even carving patterns into baseball outfields came from a scheduling mistake at Milwaukee County Stadium. They did a concert on several nights in a row during an away trip, a road trip, and then the field was decimated, and the greenskeeper said, "Hey, can I play around with the cutting height of the deck and the geometric pattern?" They basically hid it. They hid the damage to the point where the Yankees, when they came in to visit, they were in the American League back then. The announcers were saying, "My goodness, you all should see this wonderful outfield. This what a beautiful stadium." So always look for ways to say, okay, I may have screwed that up. I may have messed this up, or this didn't go well. Instead of doing this whole thing, we start to blame ourselves. This is stupid. This is idiotic. But say, hey, was this kind of a one-shot deal? Were there extenuating circumstances? Is this permanent? Is this changeable? Is this pervasive? Like
Yeah.
what could be different? So that's item number one. The other thing is the classic. I call it accept and build, but improvers would call it yes and. In fact, here's a little button up here. Are we going to read this? Yes, and
Yes.
right.
And yeah.
So, yes, and but the simpler way to say it, in my opinion, is accept and build. There's a couple of great TED talks. You can look them up, like the traits of the most resilient people out there. And one of the traits of resilient people is they accept reality for what it is. Instead of being so frustrated by and getting mad at not accepting reality, that actually holds you back. So when I say accept and build, whatever my scene partner does, like let's say Kevin, you and I are doing a scene together, and you say something that I didn't expect, that's fine. But if I fight against it, I ruin the scene, it just falls apart. Well, no matter what you do, no matter what you say, it's considered what we call an offer. It's just an offer. It's like you submit, you put out into the world, into the universe right now. You said this idea, this concept, whatever. I accept it. Hey, I may have chosen, but I accept it, and then I build on top of that. Okay, you gave me something. What now can I do with it? And so the quick thing I'll tell you right now, just this has just changed my whole approach. I'm telling you right now, my standard business for my going out to meetings and conferences amidst this virus thing,
Yep.
it's gone.
Gone.
Like
Yeah.
I mean, at least for the next 3 months, it's not like I can get a little bit of business. Like people, you walk too close to the grocery store and they freak out,
Right.
right? So one of the things I started to do is I said, you know what, and then client after client saying, hey, we're letting people go. We have no training budget. Okay, fine.
Yep.
They have no discretionary budget. So basically I have nothing. So here's what I did, partially inspired by a recent sermon by one of our pastors that basically said, we always think about helping other people, neighbors, and that sort of thing. Well, how can you help even within business? So I had 2 all ready to go programs that I'll even say right now, if someone is interested for their company, I'll do it. I have a program called Virtual Magic, how to present really well online. I have a whole program on that. And I'm also my Unflappable. I'm calling up every client I've ever had, every prospect saying, my parents raised me to help other folks out. We're in a difficult time. I'd like to offer you these 2 webinars free of charge, or dare I say I'm waiving my fee. And how would you, if you want to use it, great. And some have jumped on it. They said, this is a godsend. Others have said, hey, we're too busy treading water or whatever. But I feel like I'm able to give. And this wasn't the purpose, but already um, uh, just through a friend of a friend, I just was offering it to her. I'd given her some stuff back in the day. She works at a huge Fortune 500 company. And she said, oh my gosh, Steve, this would be the greatest thing ever. And I'm going to do a program for them. And she said, hey, basically the implication is, if this goes well, you may have just gotten into our organization.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
again, the whole point is I can sit here, I can be bummed out, I can get mad at the virus. And I was despondent for a good week. I'm not going to lie to you.
Sure.
It was very tough.
Of course. Yeah.
When everything was
Absolutely.
shutting down. The main thing is I'm going to lose all my status on my Marriott and my Southwest
American
Airlines.
Airlines or something. That's
Got to be
exactly.
A-list preferred.
That's
Yeah.
right. I
So,
may have to sit back with the cattle in the back.
oh my gosh, and to wait to board with everyone else, it's horrible. No, so but those kinds of ideas of taking those gifts or taking those mistakes and turning them into gifts, and then accepting and building no matter kind of what happens.
Right.
It doesn't mean and please, you're not Pollyannish like,
Sure.
okay,
That's
we
right.
can save the
Everything's
orphanage.
great. Yeah.
Yeah, you can still be bummed out, but you say, okay, what, I mean, if the truth be told, some of the greatest things have been invented out of a mistake. Like, for instance, nachos came out through a mistake. Toll House cookies, Buffalo Wild Wings, the Slinky. I mean, just how much time do you have? I mean, there's some amazing things that have come because someone said, okay, that's not what we would have wanted to have happen, but now what can we do with it? And so
Yeah.
that's really, I think, any entrepreneur who can do that, you'll be good to go, and you'll be ready to rock and roll.
It's the old Irma Bombeck, you life gives you lemons, you make lemonade type thing. What can I love the idea of accepting the reality, and then okay, what can you build from here? I mean, it's almost like,
Exactly.
okay, let's take stock of where we are, what we have, the resources we have, the opportunities we have right now, and this is a great time for business owners to do that. And I really appreciate just the whole tenor of the conversation, and just I mean, it's been great picking your brain, and just really hearing your story and hearing the way that just walk through kind of the ebbs and flows of being a freelancer, or being out on your own, so to speak, for a number of years, and how you've made a
Yeah.
go at that, and just the highs and the lows, and really appreciate you kind of drilling down and speaking to business owners in this time that is a real crisis
Yeah.
for them. Is there anything that you just want to close us with that I have not touched on? Just a final thought, and then tell people where the best place to find you online.
Yes. Oh, it's funny. I should have grabbed it. Do I have it right here? I'm not sure if I do. Yeah. So you can find me online at hityourstride.com. It's a running term. In fact, that's the main thing. And I also wrote a book. I just don't have it in front of me. I can't believe I don't have a copy of it here somewhere. But I wrote a book called Captivate, which is basically how do you captivate an audience. And it's, I always say to people, if you like me live, you'll love me on paper, kind of thing. And it's certainly available through Amazon, et cetera. Um, but it's uh, every day is may not be super fun, but I think with the right kind of attitudes, um, I think you're right. It may be a scary time for entrepreneurs right now, but it's also a very intriguing time for what can lay ahead if we're ready to kind of lean into it.
Absolutely, absolutely, and thank you for just leading with vision, and kind of wrapping us up today on kind of an upswing. You had our vision hockey stick pointing up and to the right a little bit as we're closing out today. But Steve, thanks again for just taking your time today, and this Good Friday right before Easter, and just giving us kind of hope in the midst of the crisis that we're facing, that one day we will be through. And just thank you again for helping all boats rise in a rising tide. Steve, have a great day.
Happy to do it. Appreciate it, Kevin.